So good morning, everybody. My name is Aleksandra Potrykus, and I'm your host and moderator for today's session with Nick Van Dam, who is hopefully joining us in a second. Nick, if you're with us, just say hello. And while we are waiting for the meeting to start, I just wanted to send sunny greetings from finally sunny Zurich. We had a lot of rain on our side, which was needed. I have a request for you. Please grab your phone and type menti.com and our code 171106 and let us know what do you expect from leaders in times of COVID and in times of crisis. And I can see Nick has joined us. Good morning, Nick. Thank you for being with us. Hello, hello, Nick. Can you hear us?
Yes, hello, I can hear you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was like, okay, it didn't work, and then the best thing is to just restart again, right? So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. So I'll just do one little round of introductions again. Good morning, everybody. I see 33 participants joining us today. Fantastic. And I think a couple of more people will join us in the meantime. I have the pleasure to host a session with Nick Van Dam, who I'll introduce in more detail in a second. But before I do that, I will just do a little bit of logistics as we do normally on these calls. I can see a lot of people already practicing the camera being switched on, so thank you for that. It's your choice to be on or off. You're naturally muted by us, but at some point we will ask you if you have any questions to unmute, so you're in control here. Also, we would like to ask you to continue exchanging any thoughts or questions on our chat, and Bilge Apak, who is with me, another shaker, will help you navigate the chat room. Our focus for today is positive leadership during the times of crisis, but also beyond. And we've planned a little bit over an hour for this session. We will see how it goes. We prefer to have a little bit of a buffer. As you can see at the end of my agenda, I have 11:15 to end. Yes, as we are doing now the welcome, I've also introduced the poll, which I will go back to in a second. We'll have around 20 minutes presentation from Nick, during which you're really welcome to pose your questions on the chat. And we'll practice something new today. For the ones who have been already with us on the calls before, we have never done breakout rooms. So today there will be an opportunity to discuss the topic of leadership during times of crisis and beyond in the breakout rooms. Then we'll come back and we will have around 15 minutes, maybe more, maybe half an hour, depending on how is the energy of the group, to have an open discussion, to ask more questions directly to Nick. And also, I just want to also call out that we received a lot of questions from people registering to the session. So thank you for that. And we'll try to address some of them in the session. So let's quickly look at our poll. I'm just gonna flip my screen to the Mentimeter again. Fantastic, and some really interesting answers have already appeared. So if you haven't yet gone to the Mentimeter, please use your mobile phone. That's the easiest. Go to menti.com and use our code 171106. And then you'll have a question. What do you expect from leaders, especially in times of COVID-19? You have one chance to answer. And there is a one big clear word already popping up on our screen, which is empathy. But I'll give you like maybe another minute to join. We currently have 19 people who already answered out of 36. So a bit more than a half have answered. Some more answers are popping up on the screen. "24 answers. I'll give just a few more seconds for everyone to complete. empathy still seems to be the biggest, but we have a couple of other words that are coming also. So the bigger the word, that means the more people answered with the same word. And we have positivity, probably in line with the topic of our conversation today, understanding, honesty, but also some other keywords like transparency, confidence, inspiration, courage to change course, new ideas. Very good. 27 people answered, maybe just 5 more seconds and then we'll flip to our presentation. But thank you so much for engaging and voicing your ideas and thoughts here. Okay, looks like the Mentimeter countdown has stopped, 27 people, so empathy is the winner. Thanks a lot. I'm just gonna present back our presentation. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce in more details our fantastic thought provoker and shaker, as we like to call it. Nick, I hope you like that title.
Yeah.
So a few words about Nick. There's a lot, so I hope I will cover most important things. But a pleasure to have you, as you're really a thought leader in the space of corporate learning and leadership, and you're an advisor, a researcher, a facilitator, and a best-selling author of more than 25 books. That's impressive. You have over 30 years of experience in both McKinsey and Deloitte as Chief Learning Officer, but also HR Executive and Client Advisor as a partner as well. Currently, Nick is a board member at IE University, Institute Empresada, Chief of the Center for Corporate Learning Innovation, and member of the IE Center for Health, Wellbeing and Happiness. He's a professor at IE Niorde at the University of Pennsylvania, where he works with candidates in the Executive Doctoral Program for Chief Learning Officers. And he's affiliated with McKinsey Company as an external senior advisor. I think what is really interesting about Nick is also that he's a founder of the e-Learning for Kids Foundation, which provided free digital lessons for more than 20 million unprivileged elementary school children. Really impressive. And over to you, Nick. Thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, welcome. You're welcome, Aleksandra. I was not sure actually, do you have the deck uploaded or do I need to share my screen?
I do. And I can give you control to manage the slides. Let's see if that's gonna work. Wonderful. And if not, then hopefully by now you received my, or you can also request it yourself. Okay, it looks like you're controlling my system now. Okay. Let me see if it's working. If not, I'm also happy to do it. Yeah, let's go to the, I'm trying to, there's an arrow actually here. It looks like it's working, right? So let me see if I can do it. Okay. Well, first, thank you everybody for dialing in this morning, for being interested in this session on leadership. Thanks Aleksandra for inviting me, and thanks for the introduction. I will keep it very, very brief. You summarized wonderful, actually, some of the things that I've been doing. Now I'm clicking on it actually, and it doesn't work. Like it's working. Yeah. So if you can go, so I will say next. Yeah. Yeah. Next. Should I just? Wonderful. So a little bit about some of what I'm excited about recently. You see actually a book here on authentic confidence, the third book. And it's a book actually that I published last year with two of my friends, one from McKinsey, another academic. And it's a book on authentic confidence. And I'd like to share a short story on this book. At McKinsey, one of the philosophies in developing people is basically asking yourself, how can you unlock your potential? And what are the barriers that holding you back? And that combined with, just try to do something that, that supports your talent, your strength.
And if you think about unlockers for potential, what we have learned over the years is that, and through a lot of research and interviews with people in organizations, including a number of CEOs, that confidence is a huge unlocker for potential for people. And what's interesting is that everybody that we have, spoken with admits that, not, everybody has moments in his or her career where our self-confidence is not necessarily 10 out of 10. And what's exciting actually is that if you think, there are people who believe that self-confidence is something that, you have or you don't have, or you have less or you have more, and it cannot be developed. But what we have researched and learned is that self-confidence is also basically a muscle that you can strengthen. You can develop that actually, and there are a number of practices that you can apply that will help you to become more self-confident, authentic self-confident, and that's a huge unlocker of potential, and very important actually if we think about our careers, our personal growth and development, and all the choices that we make in life. And I've also been in touch with people and asked them questions about, as an example, potential career moves, doing something very differently. And, and obviously confidence can help us a lot, or it can prohibit us to do what help us to become what I believe the best version of ourselves in life. So that's kind of briefly in terms of myself, and this book is a book with a lot of practices, insights that can be used, and the royalties of this book will be donated to Save the Children. So therefore I'm not shy to promote the book here. We go to the next slide. Very briefly, one of the things that I'm very excited about as well is that I have been appointed as an academic director for a program at IE, and it's called an executive master in positive leadership and transformation. This is a very exciting program for people who have, at least kind of 10 years of experience in the workforce, and it's a program that will focus on, on insights from positive psychology and the neurosciences, and I will talk a little bit about it later. It's a one-year program. It's a very well-designed program, flipped classroom, blended. So people come together 4 times a year, just 4 days, and the rest is actually completely online with a lot of assignments, etc. So if you see actually on this slide some of the key themes of this program, so it's a very exciting program that I will start in September this year. And the first week is in Iceland. So I will take the group actually to Iceland for a week, completely in nature, outside, to focusing on health, well-being, and happiness. We go to the next slide, and there's a little bit of context for the session today on positive leadership. Also reflecting on how you are feeling today, and Aleksandra, if we can build the slide here. It's kind of all of us experience something that we have never experienced before. Significant changes actually in terms of our personal life, our professional life, working from home, being surrounded by family members and others, but also our organizations are turned upside down to a large extent. And, if you look at this slide, the VUCA world, you're all familiar with this, but just to reflect on it again and say, wow, amazing, level of rate of change. If we think about the COVID time, but also if we think about the digital transformation, right? So a lot of organizations are still at the beginning in going through a massive digital transformation. And, what I have also learned recently is that a number of people are telling me that this crisis actually is an opportunity to even go faster when it comes to a digital transformation in organizations. In terms of clarity, organizations have to reinvent themselves. And what we know from the lifespan of organizations, it has shortened actually over the last 100 years. So it's now predicted that an organization on the S&P 500 will have an average life shelf of about 12 to 15 years. And then after that, it might be cut into pieces, sold out, or maybe it won't survive. So a huge turnover in terms of organizations. If we think about decision making, there are many variables that will have an impact on the decisions we have to make. And from a McKinsey perspective, we always say it's betting on scenarios. It's all about, looking at the number of variables and thinking about, what are potentially 3 or 4 key scenarios, what are pros and cons, and then basically betting on a scenario. And it also goes back to the not a right answer. Nobody knows, CEOs, nobody knows what is the right answer. Because there are too many variables and there's too much change actually. And it's all about picking a scenario, betting, executing a scenario and being very agile, right? So if things are changing, guess what? We might go from scenario B to scenario A, or maybe a little bit later to scenario C. It's all about, we are living in a liquid world, a fluid world. We need to adjust all the time. It's even, I would say, an accelerated agility that we have to embrace, that we have to, know that that's kind of our life moving forward. We go to the next slide, Aleksandra, and the question is, what do we expect? What do you expect from leaders in times of crisis? And maybe a question for you to open the chat and say, if you reflect on your organization, or if you reflect on organizations you are working with, what do you expect from leaders? Or, you are a leader yourself, what do people expect from you as a leader? So let's open the chat actually and share some of your thoughts on this.
And we had some already good answers on that question, right? In the Mentimeter, which was the empathy, but I'm curious if people will elaborate more on your question, Nick.
Yeah. Thank you, Frances. Psychological safety, presence, vulnerability, communication, agility, implementation, fast implementation, tolerance, understanding, Irina, thank you. Inclusion, yeah. Communication is a big theme, empathy, calm, vision, transparency. Thank you. So I think terrific answers, and thank you. Keep going, Sophie. Thank you. Humility. Thank you for that. So if you think about overall leadership development philosophies, one of the key themes that I believe in is that basically, if you are a leader, and we think about leadership development, no surprise, everything starts with ourselves, right? In the ancient Greece, Socrates declared, knowing themselves is key to meaning of life. So we need to understand ourselves, our emotions, our weaknesses, our strength. Everything. The more we know about ourselves, the better. So everything starts with leading self. Now, if we go to the next slide, there's one science that I briefly mentioned. It's a relatively new science. It's about positive psychology, And this is a science that basically became, or was coined actually at the end of the 90s of the last century by a person, a professor called Martin Seligman. You might be familiar with him because over the last 20 years, his science, the science of positive psychology, has become very popular. And this science in a nutshell is about, you know, what are the things you need to do to live a good life? And if you look at, you know, you think about happiness or you think about flourishing, a term that he is using a lot, and you think about people and you say, okay, ask people questions about if they are flourishing, to which extent, etc. And you basically rank everybody. You get a normal distribution, as you see on the slide here. And on the left side, you see basically the people who are the least flourishing. And that has been typically the focus of clinical psychology. It's like, well, what can we do to help people who are not flourishing or are the least flourishing, and basically move them a little bit to the right side of this curve. And what Martin Seligman learned from his research is that he said, well, you know, we should really study also people who are flourishing, people who are doing really well, and ask ourselves the question, what can we learn from people who are flourishing and apply those practices to others actually? And this can apply to, you know, to your personal life, your professional life, but it also has to do with organizations, right? So what do we know about organizations or departments in organizations who are flourishing, who are really doing well? What's unique about what they are doing? And using these practices can have a huge impact on the overall health and well-being and happiness and flourishing of individuals, of leaders and organizations. If we go to the next slide, on the next slide we see examples of a number of leadership practices that are based on positive psychology. And of course, we have no time to go through all these practices today, but I give you a couple of examples. Think about reframing. Cognitive reframing is a practice, a mental practice that can be used to look at things from a different angle and basically to reframe how we think about a specific situation, like the time that we are in today. How can we reframe this from a potential negative to a positive? What are opportunities? What are things that we can learn actually from this time? And how can we, as an example, change? Think about, you know, shaking up the workplace, right? So how can we change things that did not work necessarily in the past, and we can make it better? So reframing is a very powerful practice. You also see empathic listening. You know, if you think about leadership skills, a lot of leaders like to talk. But what is very important is to listen and be an empathic listener. Because if you are an empathic listener, you really learn what's going on, how people are feeling. And if you understand that, that can have an impact on how you make decisions, how you engage people. Think about gratitude. It's a very powerful practice that is used by more and more people. At the end of the day, as an example, to journal for yourself, what are the things you are grateful for if you reflect on the day? And what we know from research is that people who are using gratitude, practicing gratitude, are flourishing, are way more happier, are more positive, are more optimistic than people who don't. You see your hands actually. Who is journaling at the end of the day and practicing a level of gratitude, being thankful for what you are doing, have done actually the day, and so it's again, we don't have the time today to go more deeper in this, but it's a very powerful practice. On the next slide, You know, I will try to answer actually some of the questions about expectations from leaders in times of crisis, and you captured actually the number of words that you mentioned in the chat room. We're capturing this. The first one here is show empathy. It also was mentioned. Empathy, concern, real support. So it's not about, you know, playing down the situation, right, that we are in. You know, people are very concerned about the health of themselves, about the health of their family members, health of other people around them. People are concerned about what will happen, you know, maybe from a job perspective, from a financial perspective. So it's important that as leaders, we put ourselves in the shoes of individuals. And it's not about, you know, playing this down. Another key thing is here is to be open, you know, honest and vulnerable. Was mentioned as well. You know, as we know that, you know, at this point in time, leaders need to make 100% of the decisions with perhaps 30% of information. And new information is coming in all the time. And that as a consequence, it means actually that as a leader, we do not necessarily know all the answers. We don't know what the best answer is per se. It's just connecting with others, try to make sense out of everything what we know, and be open about it, be vulnerable and admit that, you know, we make a decision to do A, but who knows, you know, maybe we need to switch to B. Communication is very important, right? And if people are working from home and might be less connected, you know, you don't see the non-verbal communication per se in virtual meetings. There's a lot of uncertainty. What will happen actually? What will happen with the organization? And therefore, it's very important to over-communicate, checking in with people on a very regular basis. Share everything as a leader, what you know. Also share the things you don't know. Make sure that people feel safe, that I can ask questions about specific things and answer the question as much as you can. The communication is very key. Number 4 here is about, you know, being calm. You know, it's important that, you know, as a leader, that we also make sure that we slow down, that they take the time to connect with people, that we collect more information. And based on what's happening, we don't make decisions too fast. You know, there's a risk actually that on the one hand, we are making decisions based just on intuition because of time pressure. And although I think intuition is very important and it plays a significant role, it's also very important that we supplement intuition with facts, that we supplement intuition with checking in with people and try to make the overall big picture and say, okay, this is all what we know, this is my gut feel, this is what people are telling me. And based on that, you know, try to make decisions, but try to stay calm as well and navigate through this situation. I think if we engage with leaders who are panicking, it doesn't feel good, right? So it's concerning. Go to the next bullet.
It's yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So another key theme is, you know, I always say, there's nothing more depressed than to work for a leader who is negative and doesn't believe in the future. Now, of course, it's not about being positive for the sake of being positive, but there's always reasons. There are always reasons to be hopeful, right? So I remember, and some of you as well probably, the crisis in 2008 and also 9/11. And at that moment, people were saying, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart and we will never get out of this anymore. And we have learned over the last 100 years, even with the Great Recession, that, you know, things will change, you know, and things will get better again, right? So there is a reason to be optimistic. Let's go to the next slide.
Nick, I hope you will not mind. I have an interesting question on the chat, still on the slide. There is a question from Tamas. Do we differentiate leaders and managers in this discussion?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, you know, I have a good friend of mine who is the CEO of a company called Barry Waymiller in the United States. And he has a very distinctive culture in his organization. And the key promise that he has is, it's all about, you know, leadership is about taking care of people, caring for people. And he makes a distinction in terms of leaders and managers. And he said, you know, managers are basically, you know, are people who their own interest first, and they they manipulate other people. And he said leaders are basically people who are the stewards of people's life, right? So he makes a distinction between the manager and the leader. Now, I believe that, you know, everybody, you know, should be a leader, you know, a steward of somebody else, his or her life, and not someone who is putting his own interest first and manipulate other people for his or her own best interest. So, I go to leadership as a definition and leadership as a very different approach in terms of working with people in organizations.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm curious if the discussion will evolve on the chat. Please.
Yeah.
If you want to go deeper.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yeah, this one. So one thing about optimism and positivity, you know, what's interesting from a neurological perspective is that as humans we have a tendency to go easier to the negative than the positive. And that's kind of a more the protection mechanism that we have. Now you can say, you can have a biased negativity. So basically everything what you see, you interpret something as being negative. And of course, we have to be very careful about that because that doesn't help ourselves. It doesn't help other people. But also on the other hand, there are people who have a bias for positivity. They try to see things positive and honestly, they are not, right? So therefore it's important to think, hey, it's about what is realistic here. Don't go to the negative per se, you know, there's no need for that. And at the same time, we don't want to put a positive label on something what is not necessarily positive either, right? Now, Barbara Fredrickson is a professor in the US who has done a lot of research on emotions. And what she learned from all her research is that there's a positivity ratio. That means it's 3-to-1. That means that as humans, in average, we need 3 positive emotions to lift us up from 1 negative emotion. So I don't have time today, but as you can imagine, there's an exercise here where I could ask you, think about the last week and list all your emotions. You know, what are the positive emotions and what are negative emotions? And basically look at how many positive and how many negative. And where are you on the 3-to-1 ratio? Now, why this is important is that, you know, there's a lot what we can do to basically generate kind of, you know, positive emotions. And I always, you know, kind of examples for myself, there are small things that make a difference, right? So just, you know, taking time to listen to music that you enjoy, it gives you positive emotions. Simple things like calling a friend and have a conversation about a number of things can have a positive, generate a positive emotion. So the question is for ourselves, if we think about our schedule every week, how can we put activities on our schedule that will give us positive emotions? Because the negative emotions, you know, they come in anyway, right? So it's hard to stay away from them. So how to make sure that we go to a ratio 3-to-1 and basically, manage and help us to take care of our emotion ratio. We go to the next slide. So there are a couple of things if you think about, what do leaders need to do to keep in mind when making decisions in times of turbulence. The vitality I will cover on the next slide. But one key practice is pause and assess. As I mentioned, in times of crisis, it's on the one hand, people have the tendency to make decisions very fast on the spot, right? But it's still important to pause, assess what's going on, look at potential actions, talk to different people, collect the information you need in order to make the right decision. So pause and assess. Once you have made decisions in times of crisis, it's all about execution, making sure that you communicate why and you act and make sure that things will happen. I spoke about fact-based decisions, key, supplement that with intuition, supplement it with gaining insights from different people. And the last one here is, if you think about organizations, in terms of centralized and decentralization of decision-making, obviously in times of crisis, more decisions are made more centrally, but at the same time, it's also very important that a number of decisions can be made at a more decentralized level, because the top cannot be, the bottleneck when it comes to making all the decisions, and we need to trust many of our professionals and leaders that they can make decisions because they're very close to clients, customers, business processes, the team, etc. We go to the next slide and a question on vitality, how to stay vital, right? So if we reflect on our lives, on our careers, basically people will be in the workforce for about 40 to 50 years. And if we think about the changes, if we think about pressures on people, the question is how to have a fulfilling life professionally and personally. And a key to that is, staying vital. I'd like to show you on the next slide a model that I have developed with a friend of mine and a colleague in the United States, Noemi Leportel. She has a medical background, and she's been treating more than 10,000 people related to health, well-being, stress, burnout, etc. And in this model, you see basically three key themes, right? So it's about health, body. It's about well-being. That's our mind. And it's about happiness. It's about purpose and meaning. And there are a number of dimensions of this model, right? So if you look at, as an example, purpose and meaning, a lot of studies has been done on happiness. And what we have learned from all these studies is that basically people are happy, are flourishing, once they have social connections. So social relationships are very key to happiness. Secondly, it's about meaning and purpose. People have a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, are way more happier, flourishing than people who don't. And last but not least, it's also about learning and growth. People who continue to learn and unlearn throughout their lives, who are open to take in new insights, are way more happier than people who don't. Now, as I said, I have no time to go all through all the dimensions of this model, but a couple of thoughts also on the outside here. You see here the work environment, and that's basically, leaders need to be sensitive to the needs of team members. So I thought also you mentioned, psychological safety is very important. How to make sure that people feel safe in the environment. If we think about the social environment, it's about personal relationships. People are currently under pressure because they are at home. They cannot connect with others at the level they would like to. We cannot touch people, and touching is a key human need that we have. We cannot do that. So the social environment can have a huge impact on how we are feeling. And last but not least, and that's also, I think, what I've experienced myself is kind of in a way positive about what's happening now is nature. It's amazing with the quietness of our lives today, limited traffic as an example, that we experience the nature more than ever before. And nature and being in touch with nature can have a huge impact on how we are feeling. It can clear our minds. A walk outside can help us to generate new ideas, right? So being in touch with nature will help us from an overall vitality perspective. So again, staying healthy, doing well, vitality is key to all of that. We go to the next slide. I thought let's also share this 2 by 2, right? So in terms of reflecting yourself, in terms of where you are, if you think about how passionate you are about what you do professionally, low or high, and then the question is, how many working hours do you put in? Is it low or high number? Now, if you see actually, if you are on the low side in terms of passion, the low side of working hours, people tend to become completely disengaged, and there's a level of low performance. People who are passionate about what they are doing, but basically they are spending not a lot of time because of the kind of work, they are balanced, but there's a risk for bore out. On the right side, spending a lot of hours, but not passionate about your work. You are loyal, but there's a huge risk for a burnout. And if you're on the top of the right side, high level of passion about what you're doing, and you spend a lot of hours, you are driven, but again, there's also a risk of burnout. So the sweet spot that you see is basically on top a little bit in the top 2 quadrants, more in the middle. That's your sweet spot when it comes to passion and working hours. Make sure that you don't go overboard in working hours. And also when you work virtually, make sure that you take breaks, make sure that you stand up, that you walk around, make sure that you balance the kind of virtual meetings you have with, conversations with people. They are pleasant and exciting, etc. Okay, we go to the next slide, and the last 2 slides, and we have the break actually. And then the question is, what are opportunities for personal growth if we think about times like this? And to me, there are a number of things. One is, it's a tremendous opportunity for leaders to step up because there's a huge, need for leadership, for driving change, for reinventing the organization, business models, etc. So it's an opportunity to advance our leadership skills. But also, if you look at this figure, if you think about learning, and you have here in the middle your comfort zone. Your comfort zone are basically activities and tasks that you do that basically you feel good. You can do them. You feel very comfortable about them, etc. Your comfort zone. But we only learn if we do something that we have never done before, and that's our learning zone. So, and I think there are tremendous opportunities to do that today, right? So a lot of people in the workforce are now using digital tools, platforms they have never used before. If you look at the number of people have worked from home in Europe, I looked last night at some statistics on that. It's kind of, it's a very low percentage. There are many countries where people hardly work from home, like Italy as an example. So that means that working from home, using different tools, learning how to use your voice, how to run virtual meetings, tremendous opportunities for learning. And last but not least, also from an online learning perspective, if you look at companies like Coursera, edX, amazing massive open online courses that we can take, that people in our organizations can take for free or for very low cost. So tremendous opportunities to invest in ourselves at this time. And then we go to the next, the last slide here, Aleksandra, and it's basically my contact information on LinkedIn. Also, I show a book that I published a couple of years ago, You, the Positive Force in Change. It also talks about positive psychology and a number of the practices that I showed actually that can help leaders to flourish and professionals to flourish and have an impact on their organizations. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Aleksandra, and so we can start with the breakouts.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you. I've been watching the list of questions that came, before the session, and I think you've covered most of them. But I just wanted to. There is one that is maybe even two combined. There is something about handling emotionally loaded issues at distance, and there is a second question about, unfortunately, the dismissal conversations in distance. How can leaders support this? I don't know if you have any thoughts to share on that before we go to breakouts.
Yeah, so I think let's say even in a face-to-face live environment, if leaders have to and professionals have to deal with emotionally charged issues, it's not easy, right? So and I believe that this is kind of live or virtual. Key to all of that is also trust. It's about openness. It's about empathic listening. So there are a number of, let's say, skills, behaviors that leaders need to show that basically will help to address emotionally charged issues. So let me give you, as an example. So if as a leader, you have never built a deep, trusted, kind of personal relationship with someone, guess what? To deal with emotionally charged issues virtually is very painful. But it's also painful live, because the same thing applies, right? To have somebody in an office and to have a conversation about emotional, topics is also very difficult. So it starts again with, building the relationship. That's key. It's about trust. It's about empathy. It's about listening, right? So that needs to happen. Dealing with dismissals virtually, right? That's another key theme, and it's also, again, it goes back to what we discussed today. It's like, as a leader, to be vulnerable and admit that some decisions unfortunately can be avoided because the time that we are in. And it's also important to have a dialogue about people's potential skills, people's careers, your personal network. So can you help someone to find a role in another organization? As a leader, do you really say, you know what, I will help you to reach out in my network? I think it's all about one-on-one dialogues, and as a leader, your willingness to help someone else.
Thank you. I think there will be more discussions going on, and I have a suggestion. I'm looking at the time, so it's 10 minutes or 9 minutes now until the full hour. If some of you have to leave at the full hour, I would say let's go into breakout rooms, and you don't go back to the main room if you have to go to another call. We will be back at 11 into the main virtual room, to ask more questions to Nick. So I will break you now into groups of 4. And I like to leave it a little bit more open. Maybe there's something that sparked your thoughts and you have some more questions to each other you'd like to exchange. If you don't have any ideas for what you should be discussing in the room, just think about your own experiences of leadership, positive leadership in the times of crisis and in times of COVID. So enjoy the discussions in the breakout rooms, and see you in around 8 minutes back in the main room if you can join us. Hello. You were quick to come back to the main room. Hopefully the conversations were good. I gave 60 seconds to come back to the main room, so some people are still chatting to each other. Hope your conversations went well. If you want to share something that was discussed, I would be curious to hear, as I was sitting here on my own, waiting for everybody. Agnieszka, how was your conversation? You're on mute, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I was trying to scroll to my team participants, but maybe they had to disconnect. That I can't see them. Yeah, I mean,
everybody's returning. Yes.
Hello.
Hello back. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah.
The 8 minutes went really quick. I think.
Yeah.
Even on my own, it felt very quick. So sorry for that. I just wanted to respect the full hour, 11 o'clock. Trying to stick. So yes, I see some people are saying they will need to leave, but as suggested, we have around 10-15 minutes more, and this is more of an invitation to, to share maybe what was discussed in your breakout rooms. Anyone wants to share? I think Agnieszka,
I started saying,
yes.
So I was on the spot already. So
yes.
Yeah, I think we were in the group with Robert and Reka, and we were talking that as much as positivity, I think it's even more important to be realistic and honest. And then by sharing the same goals and creating kind of community of values, and really everyone is responsible to demonstrate those values rather than pointing out to one leader. That makes us more able to go through difficulties. So it's rather than masking and kind of being overly positive in the difficult times, be more realistic and vulnerable and show kind of more sincerity, and that creates stronger trust and stronger commitment. That was our discussion.
Thank you. And I'm a little bit insisting on the whole virtual setup. I think, before COVID, when people were saying, remote doesn't work, it's so easy to hide. I'm just curious if there has been any discussion around, how do you remove the mask on the virtual setup and being remote, and how do you stay human and build those relationships? I don't know if anyone wants to share some of their thoughts.
Looks like not, but I can share, but I'm not a good example because I've been in consulting for almost 20 years, and somehow remote work and virtual work was almost on day by day.
Yes.
The only thing that changes over years is you have a video in your kitchen now, which 10 years ago you only had a text message. And the bigger conference, virtual, somewhere.
Yeah.
Of course, the technology progresses, and yes, now we see each other in the kitchen.
I think what we have to do is just be very active and conscious to share, to take off the mask, to use your word, Aleksandra. If you take, we even have a mask when we're in face-to-face meetings, you can say, right? We hold back or we share. What I think is the difference with the digital is you have to be more conscious about sharing. You have to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. You see what I mean? Whereas you can see it a little bit, but still we have a mask even in face-to-face. So digital, we just have to work harder to disclose.
One of the things that Paulina mentioned, we were in a 2x2, was how do I take this back to my organization? And I think we can all do things. What's quite what I see is a lot of these things are around upskilling. A lot of these things are around, there's a real exacerbation of skills that were needed, but it just makes it even more heightened when we talk about remote working and the new reality or we talk about upskilling. So I think that there is a responsibility to equip people to do these things, give them the tools, give them the knowledge, the skills, which is something I'm working on. But I think there is a, how do we equip our people? Let's not just leave them out there to naturally think, well, everyone can do it. I'm a bit like our guy. I've worked from home from 2001. Yeah. However, everyone, and we used to work in the same place as well. However, everyone is not the same. So we need to equip our people with with the skills, with the toolkits.
It's even a role of HR to equip people in a manner that there are policies, and they are not just high-level policies, that they are pretty like really even by examples, telling people what to do or what not to do during those, and that helps people to navigate, at least on the basic level.
I'm not sure. So I think policies, you can get bogged down in, but also it's like someone hit the nail on the head. I was listening, I came in late, but trust. How do you really get trust into your organization? Because once you trust people, then actually the remote working becomes a lot easier. And then there's the skills of, the resilience. There's the tools of, actually, let's just have 45 meetings. How do I run an effective 45-minute meeting rather than have, meeting after meeting of 1 hour or however, but effective 45-minute meetings? How do I think about having walking meetings? So I have a big meeting tomorrow. It's actually my day off, and it's a pricing meeting, but it's one that I can have a walking meeting. So I used to have walking meetings when I was in the office, but how do you give people these tool sets to think about having walking meetings or having effective 45 meetings and having time scheduled in where you have time out to think? Because as leaders, we're not paid to do, we're also paid to think. These are kind of, tools. And yes, there are policies, Aga, to agree with you. And yes, and it's the culture of trust. It's the culture of trust that, you get beyond, but you're trusting your employees and your managers.
Irina, you shared something interesting on the chat. Maybe you want to share it with the group as well, something about the positive impact of the crisis.
Yeah, I was in the room with Isabel, and we discussed actually about the positive impacts of the crisis. And I think there are many of them. It's not only about, like, I am sure some teams felt more connected now, like they have more time actually to be present in the meeting. They have more time, but it also depends on the leaders, of course. If the leaders made them feel included and made them feel engaged, and also help them to actually upskill and to not fall into this negative emotion pool. Yeah. So just to look forward, just to see the opportunity, just to learn from the experience, not to just fall into that negative pool when you said, oh, okay, it's a crisis. So actually there was an example also in the chat that someone lost the opportunity, so they fully closed the jobs and postponed them. So it's a loss of time. So it's a very good time to learn something new, to be more engaged, to develop something new, to, I don't know, to play different, to do the brainstorm, the games online, which will actually develop people in a different way, and will actually influence team to be willing to go back and to do more without doing more, actually. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. I fully agree. And I think there is a role in outplacement as well. So even if people lose their jobs, how do we help them upskill for what could be the roles in the future that they could take, and what are the skills that are needed for the future. But I'm curious if people have more questions for Nick, as we still have Nick here with us, or maybe a group that was in discussion with Nick in the breakout. I'm curious what you've discussed together, if anyone wants to share.
I had a question for Nick. I was wondering if evidence point to a particular channel through which leaders can effectively communicate their vision, especially currently in the limitations of COVID, so that there is not so much face-to-face time anymore.
Nick, you're on mute.
So I hope it's better. So if there's is there evidence-based, is there research on how to communicate more effectively in times of crisis? Is that your question, Thomas?
That's correct. And if any channel proves to be more effective, if videos are bringing people closer to that vision, or if it's more emails, or if there's any kind of practical advice from that.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things, right? So it's also the you have a communication channel, email or video, or calling somebody, or talking live to someone. But it's also about what is the message and what's the context, right? So a simple example, we know, and there's also trust plays a role as well, right? So let me give you an example. If you get communication from a person that you don't, on the scale 1 to 5, you don't have a very trustworthy relationship with, and also the person has an impact on what you are doing or cannot do in your role, when you get an email, you start reading every single word, right? And you wonder, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And you start, from a psychological perspective, you start adding meaning to something that's maybe not written actually. So therefore, I always say, depending on the relationship you have with someone, you have to be careful what kind of channel you pick for communication, depending on the message that you want to get across. And I would say overall, if the communication is more complex, if there are subtleties, if there are, emotions, there's an emotional impact, right? The best way to do that is obviously, to be live together, or, secondly, or closely to that, like what we have today, is that, we are on video, you can see my hands, right? So you can see some non-verbal expressions as well. We have a dialogue, you can ask questions for clarification. That makes a very big difference versus I'm getting an email.
Thank you.
Very good. So we have last 3 minutes till 1:15. So maybe a chance for the last question to Nick or to the group.
Well, thanks everybody for joining this session today. I hope that there are a couple of takeaways from my very short presentation. As you can imagine, on each topic, you can go much deeper, obviously. But I hope there are a couple of takeaways. I hope it's going to help you personally, professionally. So thank you for your time. And again, thanks, Aleksandra, for organizing the session today. Wish you all the best. Stay well, stay safe. And I think also exciting times, right? So there are also a lot of things that we can do to have an impact, to reinvent how we do things, to innovate. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. To you, Aleksandra.
Thank you so much, Nick, for being with us. And I just wanted to quickly mention forms of, discussions that can continue. So we are doing those sessions like today once a month. The next one will be on the 4th of June, and the speaker will be announced soon. And in the meantime, we started practicing a new skill, which is a virtual coffee. And it's a no agenda meeting where people are just invited to grab a cup of coffee, tea, whatever is of your funding, and just join us for a conversation. And we do all this in breakout rooms. We also have a Slack community that is slowly growing, and maybe there are some questions you would like to continue answering or questioning, more topics on leadership, but also learning. So please join us on Slack or in our sessions. And again, thank you so much for your participation, and we're staying with us a bit more than an hour. And many thanks to Nick and to IE for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. All the best.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.